Hi there, my name's Sean. I'm an Enneagram teacher and a psychotherapist. And today we're going to be talking all about type 1 on the Enneagram. Now type 1 goes by a couple of different names. They're often called the reformer, the idealist, or the perfectionist. I think for beginners, the word perfectionist is a really good way to sum up type 1 because it's quite approachable and simple as an idea. But I should flag that many of the type 1s that I've met don't actually like the word perfectionist, and they feel that the word reformer is a better fit for them because they're not trying to make things perfect, just trying to constantly improve things. So type 1s are very principled, they're quite conscientious and hardworking because they are trying to improve things, and they have a very strong sense of right and wrong. However, this can often get in the way for type 1s because they're so driven to improve things, they can often forget to actually have a bit of fun and relax sometimes. And in their relationships, they can lose sight of the big picture of having connection and the importance of people in their life who care about them and that they care about over the need to be right and have things done a certain way. So let's start with the origins of type 1. The core unconscious belief for type 1 is that the world punishes bad behavior and spontaneity. Now, from what I've heard from type 1, this often stemmed from a childhood environment in which there was an older figure, most often a parent, but it could also be a sibling or perhaps an extended family member, who was very rule orientated and they were kind of a taskmaster. Doesn't mean they had to be a type 1, but this was a person who had a lot of expectations and a very strong sense of how things should be. And so the response to this from the type 1 was that I need to be good and I need to be correct, I need to do the right thing. And if I am, then I'll be rewarded and loved, or at least I'll avoid punishments, which can sometimes be quite harsh from these kinds of parents. Now, this can sometimes have been influenced by religion in the sense that the household was quite religious, and so there was a kind of external codified set of rules and expectations for how one should be, and therefore they adhered to those rules or risked being punished, and kind of were given the ultimate punishment, which was that you would be sent to some kind of damnation. Now, I've also heard the opposite of this in situations in which there was total chaos in the household. So a hypothetical situation might be there 12 kids with 2 parents who were both working full time. And so there's just utter chaos in the household at all times. And in order for the type 1 to survive, they had to kind of adhere to this internal sense of right and wrong and create order within themselves because their external environment was so chaotic. And this can sometimes have involved a kind of pseudo-parent role in which they were expected by their parents to help out with the younger kids because they were seen as responsible. And so they weren't so much loved for just who they were, but more instead for them being able to perform this role of being good and correct and right and responsible, and for not doing the wrong thing or being bad. Regardless of which one of these it is, or anything in between, the basic sense that we take away from this is that if I'm good and I'm correct and I'm right and I don't make any mistakes, then I'll be okay and perhaps even loved for that. But if I'm bad or I do make mistakes or do the wrong thing, then I'll be punished, and that means that I'm bad. And this ties in with the location of type 1 on the Enneagram. So type 1 can be found in the body center where the core emotion is anger. Now, unlike type 8s, who are very comfortable and expressive with their anger, and type 9s who fall asleep to their anger, type 1 is in conflict with that anger. Now, I would say out of everything, this is probably the most important thing you should understand about type 1s to really get a sense of how the type works. So type 1s are experiencing themselves in the world and other people and realizing there's so many things that could be improved upon and be made better. And there's also a lot of things that are just flat out wrong and that need to be corrected. And yet, this comes with a sense of anger as well. So there's this frustration and resentment that just things aren't as they should be, and people should care more, people should do the right thing. But if we think back to the basic unconscious beliefs for type 1, the world punishes bad behavior and spontaneity. And anger is a spontaneous emotion. We don't sit around and plan to get angry at 11 o'clock. We get angry because something just annoys us or frustrates us. And in terms of bad behavior, well, we do a lot of bad things when we get angry. We yell, we get aggressive, sometimes we even get violent with people. So there's this direct contradiction here between seeing things that need to be improved or corrected and wanting to correct them and being frustrated and angry and resentful that they're not as they should be. And yet realizing that If we were to get angry, we'd be punished because that's bad behavior and it's spontaneous. And so type 1s don't express their anger, and they're just instead in conflict with it. And I've heard type 1s talk about this as an experience within their body itself. They feel the anger kind of building up in their chest, and yet it's almost like there's this cork stopper that's on the top, just around their neck, that just kind of stops them from actually being able to express that anger. Now, it may come as a little surprise to you by now that the passion for type 1 is anger, and anger that things aren't as they should be. I'm bringing this up because I want to link it into the defense mechanism for type 1, which is called reaction formation. And that's a strange phrase, reaction formation. What does that mean? So we talked about how type 1s can't get angry. So when they find themselves in a situation where they are angry, what do? There's this notion that there's this kind of unconscious, preformed reactions that they have to things. I don't think that ones actually consciously sit around and kind of think about how they're going to react to things when they're angry. And maybe that is something that some ones do. But this is a mostly unconscious habit that people have. I'm not allowed to get angry, so instead, if someone's criticizing me or pointing out mistakes, I'll smile and nod and say, thank you, oh, that's really helpful. And even if they might feel that the feedback is helpful because they're interested in improving, ultimately it's not really ideal for them to be criticized and have their mistakes pointed out to them. And so they're going to get angry, but they can't be angry, so they have to form and perform a reaction to this instead. And this is really a protective mechanism, because if type 1s really believe that if they're bad, then they're going to get punished, then it helps them to not be even more bad by getting angry and throwing fuel onto the fire, by just forming a reaction that's just going to kind of cut things off where they are. And this can manifest in some interesting ways. I've heard a type 1 talk about how she can get so frustrated and angry at work, but not be able to express it. So she'll leave the office and just start running for blocks and blocks just to be able to get all of that anger and energy out of her body, because she just simply can't express it. The growth path for type 1 involves them being able to relax this need to be right, to be correct, and to improve things all the time. In the therapy room, this often looks like being able to trace back to those early childhood experiences where they were strongly encouraged to do all of these things at the expense of just being a playful, fun-loving kid who liked to explore and be spontaneous. See, many ones talk about having this internal voice or presence that they call the inner critic. It's this voice that's constantly talking about all the things they're doing wrong and all the mistakes they're making and all the things that they could improve upon. And sometimes this voice or presence is the person that was in their childhood, the voice of their father, for example. And so the growth path for type 1 involves them being able to connect more with the high side of 7, which means being more fun and spontaneous and playful. And this comes through the acknowledgement and acceptance of the fact that there's a perfection in the imperfection. Some things in life can never be perfect. If you think of nature, imagine going out into a forest and seeing that there's all this stuff all over the floor and that tree needs trimming and, look, some animal made all their droppings over here, what's this? But that's how nature is. It's perfectly imperfect. If you start to mess with these things, it disrupts the whole balance. And the same goes for art. I see many ones get engaged in art, for example, drawing, because art can never be perfect. It's always got the potential to be really, really good, but there's always something about art that could be changed or made better. And so being able to just draw something and recognize that voice in your head that's telling you all these things that could be different or better about this, or all the mistakes you've made, just being able to let that go and instead just accept the piece of art that you've made as it is. Some people can find type 1s quite triggering in the way that they readily offer feedback and criticism and advice. Now, often this is well-intentioned. Type 1s want to improve, and so if someone's telling them how they can do things better, more often than not, they're happy to take it as long as it's done well. But when it comes to other people, it doesn't always necessarily mean that other people want input and criticism and advice, and that they want to improve. Sometimes people just want to be told that they've done a good job. Sometimes people just want to be appreciated for all of their hard work, or they just want to be loved and accepted for who they are, despite all of their faults. And so when you're engaging with type 1s in your life, it might not be easy to be able to communicate this to them directly, especially if they haven't done much work on themselves. So what I would do instead is try to keep this in mind. Out of all of the ones that I've spoken to, the majority of them have said that no matter how harsh or critical they are of other people, they're nowhere near as harsh and critical of other people as they are on themselves. So while you might be bearing the brunt of some of their criticism, they're walking around with this stuff all day. So if there's anything that you need to just have a bit more of compassion with them, I'd say that's it. That brings us to the end of our video for type 1. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like the video, make sure to like it, and you can also subscribe to our channel as well for more Enneagram content. Now, if you are a type 1, I'd really like to hear about your experience of type 1, so you can leave a comment below, and maybe there were some things that I got wrong about type 1 that you can tell me about. I'm pretty sure I would have got some things wrong, but that's okay. And if you have any questions about type 1 or the Enneagram in general, you can also leave a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.